Welcome everyone to BFAMI 2021. We may not be together in person as we would like, but I'm so glad that many of BFAMI's friends and supporters are joining us tonight.
Every year, Poyo and I stand in the beautiful surroundings of a prestigious London venue to welcome you to our gala. This year, we're handing over the reins to our dear trustees, patrons, and friends.
The BFAMI Gala 2020 in January of last year was an amazing success, with the wonderful Edmund de Weil raising more money than ever for the Art Museums of Israel.
Only a few short weeks later, everything changed.
It changed for us in England.
For us in the US.
And for Israeli friends.
And for all our family and friends around the world.
One of the hardest sectors to be hit was the arts, and their struggles, along with many others, still continues.
The lockdowns in Israel were some of the hardest seen worldwide, with people not allowed further than 100 meters from their front doors.
With the number of people requiring welfare support soaring.
And the abuse reaching levels unseen before across the country.
Here we are, our BFAMI family, standing strong and standing together to help our arts museums across Israel.
It is truly heartbreaking to see all those empty, beautiful buildings. But with your support, when we are once again allowed, we will see the museum's corridors full of life, filled with love, and showcasing art once again.
Later this evening, we will be hearing directly from our museum directors and their hopes for the coming year.
We're delighted we've been able to pull together a great collection of items from around the world in some truly amazing settings.
Before we start, a huge thank you to all our supporters who you can see the names all around you on the screen. Thank you for your generosity and ongoing commitment to the projects of BFAMI in Israel.
And I'd like to thank 45 Park Lane, part of the Dorchester collection, for their generous support and cuisine today of savouries and delicacies sent to our London supporters of BFAMI, sitting this afternoon and attending our event. Thank you again.
And now, let us take you across the waters to Palm Beach, to the home of Jill Bernstein, President of the American Friends of the Israel Museum, Jerusalem, as well as Vice Chair of Island Harvest Food Bank in Long Island, New York, for over 25 years.
Jill is also on the board of the Brooklyn Museum of Arts, and with her husband Jay, they serve on the National Council of the Aspen Art Museum and the Whitney Museum of American Art.
Jill and Jay have been amazing friends of ours for many years, and I'm delighted that they have given us access to their beautiful collections of paintings, sculptures, and drawings. Anita was on hand for the tour.
Thank you for that amazing welcome. And hi, I'm Anita Zabladovich, and you are about to meet Jill Bernstein. I met her about 30 years ago when I was at an AFM event where we went to visit MoMA. And there was Jill, and I asked her what she did. And she said she was an art collector. And I thought, oh, I want to be an art collector. And then the rest is history. And here she is, Jill. Welcome.
Hi, sweetie. Good to see you.
Oh, and I have many questions to ask you. First, I want to mention that you're in beautiful sunny Palm Beach, and I'm quite jealous. But we are in London, and it's a bit dreary and cloudy here, but it's still wonderful and happy, and we've got lots of Christmas lights here, so it's all good in London. And my first question to you, Jill, is how and when did you start collecting?
Well, someone once said to me, if you're a collector always, always have been. So maybe it started when I was a little girl and I collected charms. I don't know. But the art, I really started in high school. I collected posters. And then I got signed posters. And then I went on to prints. And then finally, I was able to afford the real deal. So I started really collecting nice art.
That's great. And you have since then been consistently a great collector. And can you tell us what you look for when you are adding an artwork to your collection?
I think I would say sometimes the art finds me, not necessarily I go out hunting for it. It just all of a sudden it's in my face, either at an art fair or at a gallery or in someone's home. I see something that really speaks to me, and that's how I collect. It has to be here first.
It always feels that your collection seems so apparent and consistent, and it seems to always have a language, which I really love. And my favorite piece in your collection is the Christbird and lights in your back garden in New York. And my most wacky piece that I love is your Robert Gober sink. What are your favorite pieces?
I'm glad you didn't say what is my favorite piece, because that's a little hard. I have lots of favorites. I mean, for the most part, I would say almost all of the pieces that I have a love for. I don't know if I want to say what I might think is, it's hard. It's like talking about your children. You can't talk about one and not the other. So I don't know. I don't know how to go about that. I mean, I love everything I'm living with right now, which you'll see some of. And the same in New York. You know, there are pieces that aren't out, and they will get out, and they're in a box for a reason or storage, but I love them all.
I remember when I first met you and you had everything under the bed, which was quite amazing. You didn't have a storage space, and then everything else was just under the bed. I do not know how you managed to fit everything there. Well, please show us around. We'd love to see some of this art that you have collected all these years.
I would love to show you. Come on, let's go.
Yeah.
Here we have Ellsworth Kelly, and he's associated with minimalism, hard edge painting, and color painting. And his technique emphasizes the line, the color, and the form.
And you have next to you, I know, Daniel Burren, but I love the Ellsworth Kelly because it's so dazzling. And when I first came with you to see Ellsworth Kelly, I did not understand it, and I wish I had then, because you are a true visionary, and there it is with you, and it's wonderful to look at when I come to visit you. I don't understand Daniel like I understand Ellsworth.
Again, it's what he's done here is these are actually awnings, fabric awnings, and he's painted the stripes, some of the white stripes. They're always with another color, and he also was a minimalist, and he says that the representation, there is no other representation except the piece itself. So it is what it is.
There we go. And I know that you're going to now be walking past this wonderful Mark Bradford.
Mark Bradford. It's a boy, and looks kind of like a nautical remnant. So it kind of really works here.
Yeah, with the water.
Yep.
And
And this is Pedro Reyes, a brilliant artist. He's modernized an old sculpture, let's say. He's made it into what would now be an iconic piece in the modern contemporary age.
And there in front of me, I see Rachel Kneebone, which
Yes.
we discovered together.
We did. I don't know how many years ago that was. It was at the Zoo Art Fair.
Oh, that was at least 15.
This looks like an 18th century sculpture from like maybe the decorative arts, but if you see it much closer, you'll notice it's not 18th century at all. It's very contemporary and very seductive.
And I like that you collect international art because Rachel is British and Mark is American.
Yep, I'm all over the place. And over here we have Damien Ortega. This is called pluricellular. It's very hard to say. And what he's done is he's trying to combine mass production, which is the cement, with the natural world, which is the form. And they fight against each other, but they do also in a certain way become one. So there's a lot to think about in that piece, how they work together, the interdependency, I guess.
And it takes you into these, oh, look at that view. Oh, wow. As we're passing, we see the view of the harbour. It's just spectacular and so wonderful to see. So we move into an incredible floor and wall piece. The floor piece is by Alicia Quad, and the way that you juxtapose those together are really incredible, and they're really two generational artists, aren't they?
Yes, they are. This piece is called July 14th, 2014 at 12:15 p.m. And what she did was there's a tiny little piece of gold on top, which is an ingot, and let's say it was $1,000 that day. What she's done is she's taken all the other metals and showed what size it has to be $1,000 that day. So you've got metal, you've got the metals of copper, lead, aluminum, tin, and silver, and zinc, I think also. And the other part of that is it just makes a beautiful minimalist piece again.
So moving from the Alicia Quaid, also very conceptual, but an artist from another era, is the Sol LeWitt. And can you tell us a little something about it?
Yeah, well, first of all, Sol LeWitt was a minimalist and a conceptual artist. And he made his own guidelines for making a painting or a drawing. And I had people here that go by the guidelines that he uses, and they stayed here for 16 days putting on the color, which is multi-layers of color, because each piece, each strip here has a guideline for which colors go first, and this is how it all comes out.
And when you leave your home, or you apply it somewhere else, it's from a piece of paper, it's a contract.
Yes, it's a certificate that shows you everything that you need to do, and you paint over the wall so that nobody else has it. And also you can put it in 2 homes, so it's very thrifty.
That's a really good deal.
Yeah, it's a bargain. This is Mana Shnai. This is Yo-Yo Kusama, very organic abstraction. And if I could just shut the lights out for 1 second so you can see what the Rovner looks like.
Yeah, this is a video work, and you're going to see something quite remarkable. And Michal Rovner is from Israel, and she's also shown in the Israel Museum and very much so in the Tel Aviv Museum. So what is interesting about her work also is that she had an incredible exhibition outside the Louvre in Paris, and it was called Macom, and she created these stone buildings that became places of refuge. And it's always about immigration, and definitely talks about today's issues in her work.
It's migration, misplacement, movement. It reflects what's happening. You're right.
And it's quite a remarkable piece and so atmospheric. We love to see this work, and she's an integral part of the Israel art world.
Very much so. Here we have Olafur Eliasson, who has taken the light and the color from Turner paintings, placed them on circle canvases, and tries to generate a feeling of endlessness and meandering. You just keep going around and around with this. It's mesmerizing.
This is amazing work, and it's based on a computer-generated work, and it's done on ratio of what is actually in the painting itself, and it's I find it incredibly moving. And I see a wonderful Mark Bradford in front of you.
You do. This is like a topography of Hong Kong, and he's taken urban planning blueprints, put them on the canvas or paper, whatever it's backed on, and he's added posters and newsprint and colored paper, and he layers it on, and then he sands it down, and then he layers it on, and it looks like a city.
This work is just gorgeous, and it really brightens up the home. Not that the home needs to be any brighter. Oh my goodness, what's that in front of you, Jill? What is that? It looks like a bird's nest.
It is a bird's nest, but not really. It's for big people. It's this was, watch your step here too. This was something that we commissioned because we supported the 5,000 Arms to Hold You, which was the big bamboo of the Israel Museum. And we decided we did it in memory of Jay's mom, and we thought it would be really nice to have something like that here. So we have a tiny one. It may be just 100 arms, I'm not quite sure. But anyway, we have, just like at the museum where they had the stairs wandering all the way up to the top, we have our little stairs, and then we can sit out here. It's like it's our own happening. It's great.
Well, please take a seat and let me ask you a few questions.
Okay.
And Jill, next to your big bamboo in the Israel Museum is the Roxy Payne tree that I know you and your family donated to the Israel Museum, and definitely worth the visit and to see it. It is a spectacular sight. And I want you to tell us more about your philanthropy.
Well, Jay and I have always been involved in different organizations. I've been involved with Island Harvest, which is a food rescue organization in New York, and for 30 some odd years, I guess. We're involved with the Washington Institute for Middle East Policy. And then there are a lot of museums that we're involved with, and hospitals, and all of it. We, wherever we can help, we try to.
I remember you driving around to different homes, delivering food from restaurants all around New York.
Yep, I picked it up and in our little freezer things and deliver them to, homes and things. Yeah.
It was so impressive. Jill, which other museums have you supported?
Well, I've supported the Brooklyn Museum, which I'm on the board of, Tel Aviv Museum, Artiz, which is an organization that promotes Israeli artists around the world, the Hirshhorn, Aspen, many.
Aspen Museum and of course the Israel Museums, which you're president of AFM. And I know I was talking to you about the Roxy Payne, which you donated, and it's in the gardens of the Israel Museum. Have you donated any other special artworks that you would like to talk about?
Yeah, I mean, the Olafur Eliasson that you saw in here, we gave one to the Israel Museum. A Damien Ortega piece and some of the Free Fall in the Tel Aviv Museum we've donated to. The Brooklyn has a few pieces, a Solowit and a Theaster Gates and Kathy Butterly. I spread it around. I spread it around.
Are your children interested in the collection? And what are your plans in the future?
Two of my girls like art, but they want to pick what they like, not what I want to give them. And one of them, my youngest one, is interested in art. She likes going to galleries, and she likes to look at art with me, so that's nice. I know that we'll be donating a lot of pieces to different institutions, and I don't know. We're still working on it.
And will you be expanding a little bit?
Of course.
Love this. Watch this space. And, it's incredible because you're the president of AFM in USA, and that is a job not to be underestimated. It must be a very, very exciting position for you, Jill. Can you tell us something about it?
I've loved the museum forever, at least since the 80s when I first got there. And it's exciting. And I feel so good about doing it because I feel like I'm really making a difference there, trying to help keep things orderly and organized, especially now. I think we're doing a great job of helping them keep the museum solid, and it's an everyday job, and I love it. Love it.
Well, thank you, Jill, and send my love to Jay. And I know you've been a great support to BFAMI as well as AFM. So I'm so grateful for all these years.
And thank you for having me, and to everybody, happy and a healthy New Year.
Jill, what a beautiful home and a fabulous collection. Thank you so much for sharing it with us. And to Anita, it was so interesting to hear about your journey into art collecting, and we can see the amazing bond you have with Jill.
And now, for something a little different. Our BFAMI Now Emerging Artist Sale is a new initiative showcasing the new generation of photographic art that is coming out of Israeli art schools.
Approximately 500 students graduate annually from various art schools throughout Israel. This early moment in their career holds a special promise and revelation of what hopefully will evolve into a lifelong commitment to the creation of art.
BFAMI's 2021 Guest of Honour is Thomas Struth. Since the late 70s, Thomas Struth has been capturing our time, reconciling forms of documentation and contemplation, the world today as seen in empty streets of different cities, worship venues, cultural sites, but also nature, family portraits, and, more recently, industrial and technological locations. often underlining the relationship with the sublime.
The examination of different situations and their impact on people's way of acting is typical of Thomas Struth's work. His recent images are becoming more and more abstract and introduce new subjects of reflection, such as the relationship between humans and machines.
With exhibitions all over the world and awards too many to list, we are delighted that Thomas is BFAMI's 2021 Guest of Honor. Last week, BFAMI's great friend, the visionary curator Mark Godfrey, spent time chatting with Thomas.
Thomas Struth, thank you so much for joining me today to talk to everyone supporting BFAMI, and thank you also for your support. Usually we would see each other in person, and I remember with fondness when we met each other last time when you had your shows in London. So it's strange to be talking over a Zoom call. I'm in lockdown in London and you are in Germany. Can you tell me where you are right now, and also what it's been like not being able to travel and to work in your normal way as an artist?
Yeah, when we're locked down here in Mecklenburg, in a place in country house that we built in the last 7 years when we bought the property, and it's 2 hours north of Berlin. It's in the Lake District, which we love. And so we're very privileged. We're going to stay here until your school resumes your education in presence, and we do homeschooling 5 days a week. I might say that I found it. Maybe in the first lockdown, I've photographed some dying flowers in our garden here, in particular oriental poppies, which are your really huge poppies, and you blossom and then they decay, and it's very colorful, but you're dramatic. And since I was recently, or in the last few years, you're interested in mortality, I found that kind of fitting. Otherwise, it's not only the lockdown because of the pandemic, it's also the political situation in the world that was very distracting in a way, and its narrative, your Brexit, the American presidency, and all the things that entangled was kind of occupying and so dramatic that it's very difficult you react literally to it, but to keep it, you keep the hope for a different, for another better time to come, lively, and not be seduced to make it, to go into a more literal art production of these on these themes.
Other than the photographs of the poppies in your garden, have you been able to travel to make new photographs in the last?
No, I did not at all. Yeah, I mean, last year I've only traveled between Berlin and Krumbeck, this place here, and luckily or strangely, a coincidence was that I, after the finissage of my exhibition at the which one of the biggest shows I've ever done, I decided I would like to have a sabbatical and not do another solo exhibition in 2020, not knowing that this will coincide with the pandemic. So for me, it was in a way, for me and my team, my assistants, it was something we were already looking forward to quite a time and deal with my database and other things to work on, which normally we didn't have time to do so. So in a way, it was a strangely matching coincidence.
Did you have any desire to go to some of the laboratories where the new vaccines are being researched? thinking back to your old work, I wondered whether you may have tried to go to the Pfizer laboratory to look at the development of these new vaccines.
Well, I think that's because this is all your microscopic questions. I looked at 2 or 3 different medical facilities. In the past maybe 11 years, I've been photographing in technology and science locations, but I found them, and I made some pictures, but it's by and large, it's what the issues are there is not visible. So the question would have been, you go into microscopic imagery, which I think is known too much, or it's too common for people to see that in magazines and so forth.
I want to come now to talk about the work that you're very generously donating to BFAMI, which is a photograph that you made in 2008 called Space Shuttle to Kennedy Space Center, Cape Canaveral. And I'm interested in how unusual an image this is of Cape Canaveral. If I hear that name and I try and think of images, or if you do a Google image search, you'll come across spectacular images of rockets launching. And you make the very opposite kind of image, which is not spectacular and which is hard to interpret. It shows 3 people working, but we're not quite clear what they're doing or exactly where they are. Can you tell us about how you came to be in Cape Canaveral and why you wanted to make this kind of image there?
Yeah, I came to, this was in 2008, and around 2007, 2008, I was, this relationship between fascination and almost hypnosis of technical advancement versus a decline, I would say, of social political development made me think, created the desire to look into the technology world and see what this obsession is and what the promises are and what it really looks like or what it feels like. These fields are turned into sculpture. So and at the time I was involved in a workshop. I gave a workshop at the Atlantic Center for the Arts in the New Smyrna Beach in nearby Cape Canaveral for 3 weeks. I spent 3 weeks with 8 students. And then since Cape Canaveral was nearby, I went on a visit there, and I was I was very fascinated by the political implications, because I did not, even though I was already born when the moon landing happened, and I remember seeing footage on television, with my parents and my siblings, and so I remember that. But when I did the visit, I realized on a different level how important that was as a gesture of political force between the US and Russia. So I decided I would like to go there and photograph there. So it took me a long time to get the permission, which actually partly happened through my friendship with James Lingwood, because he knew that at NASA there's one person who deals with actors and actresses and artists who are interested in doing something. So I contacted the person, and he said, yeah, sure, if you want to, what would you like to do? Would you like to photograph the repair of a space shuttle? And I thought, oh my God, is that really possible? So I went there for 4 days. What mostly struck me how utterly handmade the space shuttles are, which is a big discrepancy to the idealized imagery we're used to around space travel and Cape Canaveral. In particular, the heat tiles here, the underside of the space shuttle, are all these little tiles which are baked in a garage next to that space where I photographed, and they get they have to be checked each time when the space shuttle comes back, and they're checked by two different teams of each maybe 4, 5, 6 people who are allowed to stay in their private clothes while they're working there, so that they stay very relaxed while they're inspecting the tiles. Then they get photographed. 20,000 pictures of the 20,000 tiles, so that they can compare the photographs before and after. And I just found it extremely striking how, as I said before, it's an idealized imagery that is circulated worldwide, but the object and the circumstances are very, very different.
It's interesting to hear exactly what's going on in this image, that people are installing the heat tiles at the bottom of the space shuttle and checking it by hand, as you say. And these are very sort of almost like homemade tiles or tiles made nearby and installed in a very handmade way. But what interests me about the photograph and the way you title it is that these processes aren't completely legible. It's not that we can see this photograph and understand exactly what's going on. And I think that's a characteristic of many of your photographs of laboratories and places where technology is being developed. Mm-hmm. They remain opaque in some way, that they're not claiming to explain or make transparent what's going on. Why is it important to work like that in some way, to not exactly try to be transparent about what you're looking at?
Well, because that was a deliberate choice, because I wanted, I thought, let me show you what the sculptural environment or the sculptural objects look like that came out of your mental process or your process of thought and cooperation, and then see what's the atmosphere of that set of sculptures, and to maybe disclose a different kind of a reality or different side of the reality of this. Plus, of course, it's more interesting to give a riddle to the beholder, to the observer, than you to explain it. That's why I do not label these pictures with an explanation of what you're looking at. I just give it one title. As a matter of fact, later on, in the last few years, I decided to make the titles even more general. For example, call one picture where you see a huge setup of an experiment. It's entitled Measuring.
And do you think this riddle means that your photographs of these kinds of places are different in character to the generation of German photographers in the 1920s and 30s, whose photographs of factories were in some ways trying to be very celebratory and transparent and make clear what was in the image?
The question is, my goal is, we live in a world that's much more, for everyone, or for many more people, or for many more people's lives, the atmosphere of the time we live in globally is much more present and much closer to your private life, or just the energy you feel of the time we live in. And so the question is, how can you find an equivalent of this energy, of the contemporary time? And to my astonishment, but also your satisfaction, while I had this exhibition tour called Nature and Politics, which had 6 venues, I ran several times into people, your visitors, who came to me and said, that's the time we live in, what we see here on the walls. And it was, of course, astonishing, because all of these people who said that, they've certainly never been to any of the places. I'm showing.
Thank you. I want to talk about now 3 different photographs that you made in the time that you spent in Israel, Palestine, and 2 of them in Tel Aviv and 1 of them in the occupied territories. I think it's a really interesting body of work, what you photographed, what you selected in the group of photographs you published and exhibited. And I want to start with the photograph, which is titled City Hall, Tel Aviv. I remember seeing this and feeling very sad and pained. And I remember seeing it with colleagues who didn't have that response to it. Mm-hmm. And to me, what was interesting is, you know, they may have seen this photograph as a building, the City Hall in Tel Aviv, as being somehow connected to a legacy of German photography of built structures. Maybe they were thinking back to Berndt and Phillipe and their photographs of architecture. It's a very frontal photograph. It shows the building with extreme clarity. It's a very clear angle onto the photograph. And there are no people. It doesn't try and produce a type of mood. And yet when I saw this photograph, it immediately speaks to me of the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin and therefore of the collapse of the peace process. Mm-hmm. And there are elements in this photograph like the security fence at the bottom, which is between you and the building. And also the fact that the 3 Israeli flags are not blowing in the wind, but are all kind of collapsed. And those elements, and also the darkening sky, the fact that this is made, I think, late in the afternoon, to me capture this mood that, you know, that's about what happened at this site and not just what is in the picture. Is that what you were trying to achieve? And when you made this photograph of the City Hall?
Yeah, I was very aware about all the elements what you just described. I mean, it was very moving to be in this, to come to that location, to see this building, and in particular when you are on a big piazza, a big space like this, open space which is potentially open for, you know, protest, for a positive demonstration, for a rally, or for leisure, and you know, so it is sort of a platform for civic activity and gathering. And then I observed this building, I studied it, and I felt it gave me an idea of this is a building where politicians and administrations sit, and it had a kind of a warren. You know, it's a beautiful building actually, and it had like signs of wear, and it's you know, it has these little details like posters that sit in the different windows. So it's a very humane. It has a humane use. Yeah, but then I made a particular decision also to photograph it in the early evening, because it's a time of the day where usually that day is over and so the evening comes. So whatever was done in that day, you cannot turn back anymore. And you go into the evening or the night, your resume of the past and the hope for a new dawn or for new, for the next day where things here could change and become better, or you do something which you've never done before, and so forth. So yes, it was it was very much made. It was your knowledge of the assassination and the memory. Yeah, and all the hopes and disappointments that are connected with this. But I wanted to make a picture that addresses this and addresses your possibility of hope.
That's really interesting. The second photograph that I want to talk about that you made in Tel Aviv was a photograph which is just called Front Yard Tel Aviv. And again, I look at that image through, in some way, a history of photography of Tel Aviv architecture. Tel Aviv architecture has always drawn photographers and artists because it's, the promise of the white city, these buildings which were built often by people coming from Germany and other places to build a new society. I look, for instance, at the photographs that Günter Ferg made when he went to Tel Aviv, and often he used the kind of camera angles that Bauhaus photographers made or used in the 20s and 30s, looking up to balconies from below, capturing white architecture at really exciting angles. Your photograph shows a kind of yard which is overgrown. To some extent, it reminds me of some of the photographs you've made of jungles. In the background is a building where paint is peeling off the walls, and there are lots of air conditioning units that puncture this architectural facade. And there's a string of flags which seem to have been strung up in the garden. Maybe it's an Israeli Independence Day celebration. But the overall feeling of the photograph is a kind of, instead of a utopian newness, it feels sort of like an image of decay or everyday life, but slightly decaying. Again, is that something that you were trying to capture? And when you photographed in Tel Aviv, were you thinking of making a different type of image to the ones that have been made there?
Yeah, the entire project, this place, which was initiated by Frederick Brenner, who's a dear friend of mine, and I'm very thankful for this, this opportunity to come to Israel many times, and which is very, very maybe necessary or something in my life that I had been somewhat waiting for, or so was the main center of or starting point for everyone in the group of artists who worked there was in Jerusalem. So by the later time of the project, when I knew already what the others had photographed or what I had photographed, I thought there's not very much of Tel Aviv in the entire body of work of everyone. So I went back to Tel Aviv, and of course I looked at the so-called Bauhaus buildings, and I looked at the architecture, but I found that this is not possible to photograph it in a way that it would express something in general. And I'm, for good reason, is always very interested in the question of the individual and the community, or the larger your responsibility. So when I was looking around in Tel Aviv, and this was in the street where the hotel was, where I lived, so where I stayed. So I've been walking past this many times, and I just found it a striking picture of a front yard that's like a garden. It's a wild garden with banana plants. It's warm, so it has a lushness. Then it has the national, the Israel flag there. So someone who's Israeli, who loves his country, who loves the history, and to be there. Then it has your signal of exhaustion. You are not being able to take care of everything that you have. So it has this side also, and I just you found that you're touching and you're very imperfect your notions that came together there, versus in the larger political world, you mostly have to deal with promises of an ideal future, or of a solved future, or future that has, where things come to a solution or something like that, which is, of course, not possible. You can you only come closer or more distant to a solution. So in a way, yes, it's a picture also of decay and of letting things you fall apart. Yeah, not being well maintained. So, and of course, I was fully aware of that's not idealizing anything, but that's not that was not the task here.
A very different photograph of built structures, and the last photograph I want to discuss is the photograph called Har Homa, East Jerusalem. And unlike the two buildings or two sort of architectural situations that we've just talked about, which were in Tel Aviv, where you have these buildings showing some sign of decay or use, this photograph is showing new buildings, and they're very far away from you as you stood there in the distance. And what dominates this photograph is a huge swathe of, maybe it's concrete or rubble, that's almost like pouring into the valley. And this seems to be the bedrock for even more buildings that will be built soon as this settlement expands. And it's like that this rock or this concrete is overtaking a valley that I assume has been used in the past to graze sheep or to just farm land, maybe very in a way that's been there for centuries. And the light in this photograph is also around evening time. Can you tell us something about what it meant to make this photograph?
Yeah, this was a picture that came to being through a longer process, because on my first journey to Israel, maybe like 5 years earlier, I arrived in Tel Aviv at the airport. Then I was picked up, and we drove to Jerusalem to the hotel. And when we passed by the settlement, which at the time struck me as with its similarity to the Tower of Babel, as in Bruegel's painting in Vienna at the Kunsthistorische Museum. And I was completely struck by it. I thought, this is incredible. So I started to photograph it and try to find the right light and the cropping to make it like a Tower of Babel image in a way. So I photographed it, the settlement, maybe 4 or 5 times. You almost each time I got there, but it was never. It became the perfect picture I wanted. And then another time I came there and I saw they're going to extend the settlement, and I walked around, I drove around, and I even took some photographs inside the settlement of the streets. And you finally saw this opportunity to show the settlement and then the expansion. You were just, of course, a gesture of land eating, or occupying, and to say something about the general feeling. When I'm in Israel, when I was in Israel, I feel for both sides. I don't make populist pictures. I don't make pictures with easy judgments. So in a way, I'm not, and I couldn't help to feel often kind of sadness when I'm in Israel. Despite all the fantastic people I know, and you have many friends. So, but there's always a lingering sadness about the fact that there are two groups who would prefer that the other group you wouldn't be there. To name it that simply. So that's about that picture.
Well, thank you very much. I think we've probably got to the end of our allotted time, but I wanted to thank you so much for participating in this, and also for the very generous gift of your work, which will be offered to the Friends of BFAMI. So thank you very much. And very nice to catch up.
Thomas and Mark, thank you. It was fascinating to experience tech, science, and the Israeli state of play through your artistic eyes.
Before we move on, a huge thank you to Thomas Struth and Max Hetzler Gallery, who have very generously donated this artwork, which is part of Thomas' technology series.
This space shuttle, Endeavour, flew its final mission to the International Space Station in 2011, clocking over 122 miles and spending 299 days in space.
The bidding is now open on the auction section of the website and will remain open until Monday, 2 p.m. GMT. It's really an amazing piece, and I'm sure it will raise lots of money for all our projects in Israel.
And now for our final visit. We are traveling to Israel to see the home of Phillipe Weil. Phillipe is a consultant to family offices. He is the author of Woes of the Rich, Seeing Beyond the Money, and has featured in print, online, and television media.
Phillipe's parents were collectors of international and Israeli art, and he has continued this passion for the arts. The family are philanthropists of Israeli artists and a great friend and supporter of the Israel Museum.
Phillipe is joined in his beautiful home by Dr. Amitai Mendelssohn, Senior Curator and Head of the David Orgler Department of Israeli Art, and by Dr. Adina Kamian-Kazdan, David Rockefeller Senior Curator of the Stella Fishbach Department of Modern Art.
Phillipe and his wife are passionate about Israeli art. We are delighted that he has opened for us the door to view his beautiful collection.
So here we are in the center of Tel Aviv, the Habima Theater, the Philharmonic, and this marvelous sculpture of Menashe Kadishman, which you will connect to with my collection as well. Israeli art, everything goes up, Itromamut, which means uprise. And we are close to my home, and I invite you to come over and see what we have to show you. Shalom, hello, come in. Welcome at our home in Tel Aviv. And already here, just in this little 4 paintings you can see here, you see actually all of the story of my art. This is Meir Pichhaze, a painting which we received, Oli and I, as a wedding gift from my siblings. Again, I'm traveling, I'm just arriving in Israel. On the other hand, you have David Ribis, Tel Aviv roofs with the antennas and the solar collectors for the hot water, the plastic shields, Tel Aviv with a little bit of greenery. Ori Reisman, the very minimalistic Israeli portrait of an Israeli artist, Ori Reisman. And the cherry on the cake is back to Europe, the more European you can't get, a drawing by Ori Matisse, which comes from my parents' bedroom actually. It's a drawing, it's I think a wonderful piece which you can with just a few strokes draw a beautiful woman and a beautiful expression in the face. I think it's an amazing work and I love it very much. So here we move to the next room, which is still the heart of the building, which is the family room, where you see that the collecting is being celebrated here We have on one hand the Pez collection of my wife, which is collecting the Pez dispensers, which is a wonderful hobby, very colorful. But you also have my car collection from when I was a child, as well as, of course, art. So if you're on this side, you see here we have Michael Gross, an Israeli minimalist artist. He's one of his portraits we have here in the collection, the brown color of the Israeli art. And here we have Jan Rauchberger, also Israeli artist. So first of all, that you know, if you haven't recognized yet, we are on Rothschild Boulevard in downtown heart of Tel Aviv, in a typical Bauhaus building with high ceilings, many rooms, dining room. Not many apartments in Tel Aviv still have dining rooms. We are very fortunate to be able to live in such an apartment and to enjoy all the best of Tel Aviv, of course, when there's no corona, because right now there's not much open, but we have all the cafes and all the life down in front of our house or door. So it's a very pleasure to have all of you here. And if you ever come to Israel again, hopefully soon, and you're not only going to Jerusalem to see the museum, but you're also in Tel Aviv, I would be very happy to receive you and see you here. So a little bit about us. My name is Phillipe Weil, for the ones who don't know me. My parents were Jacqueline and Ernst Weil of blessed memory, which were many years part of the International Council of the Museum, so many of you might have met them or known them. So here in Tel Aviv, by now, my parents were in Switzerland, but I made Aliyah 25 years ago. In 1996, I came to Israel, and from a very art-loving home. My parents were art collectors, but mainly international art. So when I came to Israel, I started to get to know the Israeli art scene and learned a lot about the difference between the international art and Israeli art. There's much more light here, and there's much more earthy colors, which is very nice combined to looks like our desert and looks like our country in general. So when I came here, I still had some art from Switzerland, which I brought here, of course, but I started to buy here art which was iconic art, established artists, names we all know, and which you buy in an auction house and you don't have, or a gallery, but you don't have to find yourself. So it was the famous artists like Michael Gross, very minimalistic, minimal art. Uri Reisman, Michael Gross. This is the minimalistic of an Israeli painting. It's called The House in the Sun, and you see the house, 2 windows, a door, and the sun. Very simple. Michael Gross, the same as the portraits. It's one of the first paintings I bought when I came to Israel. Slowly, I saw more the local artists, but also I noticed that a lot of artists go through the same process I'm going through, which is arriving here, but coming from there. And until you're really here and not there, there's a lot of transition period. And this transition period you see in the work, in the artwork of artists, which perhaps started in Europe or learned in Europe and then came here, how the color changes, how the color palette changes, so, and also how what they are painting and what they are drawing. So I have here in my collection art which is very Israeli, but if you look at it in depth, you actually see that there is looking from the outside, from the Oleh Hadash, from the new immigrant, who feels that he's part, but he's not 100% part because he was not born here or didn't do army service here or things like that. So if you look at the art here, we have the newer art, the art which I bought after the first wave of Arichas and Michael Gross and Reisman. I bought Arik Eliyahu Bokopsa, a North African born French who made Aliyah when he was like 6 years old with his family, with his parents, and was actually a pharmacist and then became an artist. And he is very Israeli, but on the other hand also looks Israel from the outside with a critical eye. This 8 wars of Israel. You have the Wars of Independence, the 56 Sinai War, where you have the British and the French involvement. You have the 6-Day War. You have the Atashah, which is 71 to 73, the ongoing battle between Egypt and Israel. You have the 73 War, Yom Kippur, Lebanon 1, Lebanon 2, and the last one is Zuketan. You will see that at the side of the painting, this is the sign you get when you serve in the army at that war. It's called the Ot, So every time the army gives a sign, he made a painting of the war. Very critical eye on Israel on one side, and also a very romantic eye on Israel. And I think that the combination of this is seen in his art, and is also seen, I see the same thing. I'm very Zionistic. We came here because of Zionism, or I came here because of Zionism. I'm married to an Israeli woman, and we have Israeli children, and I'm very proud and very happy to be Zionist and to be here. But still I'm not from here. So, and this will never end. I will always feel that I'm arrived here from somewhere. And the artists I follow, the artists I see, sometimes are very Israeli, to be the opposite of what I am, or are in the same situation I am and expresses in their art. Lately, I discovered, we know the artist for some time, Zoya Cherkassi and the whole group of new Barbizon here in Israel. Zoya Cherkassi, the typical Israeli symbols of the palm tree, typical school building, socialist architecture from the 60s, I guess, the flag on the school, the air conditions, everything what you can think about Israel, the girls in their school uniforms, and then the Ola Hadasha, the new immigrant, in a beautiful dress, when most probably her mother made for her or organized that she has a beautiful dress when she arrives, and the painting is called New Student, and that's exactly how you feel when you come from outside. You're a stranger in this setting, you don't fit in, you don't have black hair, dark skin, you're this white girl from Russia or Ukraine, or the Ole Hadash from Switzerland, which is most probably the same. The last painting I bought from Zoya is a portrait of Zohar Argov, which is one of the leading Oriental musicians, Mediterranean musicians in Israel. He died a long time ago. A very sad story, his life story, but he's called the king because he's the leader of the Mizrahi music, but himself a very sad person, but he's kind of the underdog, the other underdog. He's not the new immigrant underdog, he's the underdog because he's from not Ashkenazi, but a Sephardic origin, which was in Israel this duality, which unfortunately also today we see that in Israel the society is very split. So my art is representing what I am. It's representing the new immigrant, representing this duality. In my collection, which I have inherited from my parents, there is a beautiful Calder sculpture, which will be seen soon at the Tel Aviv Museum. So actually, I only have a film I made from my mobile phone because the sculpture is already at the museum. So you will be able to hear from the Tel Aviv Museum and about this exhibition hopefully soon when the Corona lockdown is over. Actually, there are a few artists which I collected 10, 15 years ago, which I today less look at. There was one, Hannah Sar, which is a photography artist, wonderful photography, very deep and difficult photos. It's actually only landscapes, but the way she takes the pictures are very packed with feelings. And then there is, of course, David Rieb, which has been very famous for his political paintings, but I have chosen actually to collect more the Tel Aviv street sceneries. He painted from his studio window Tel Aviv as we know it, Florentine, the South Tel Aviv neighborhoods. You see the whole balagan of Tel Aviv skyline, if it's antennas, sun collectors for the hot water. All of it is there, but always in the middle, either a palm tree or some beautiful pine tree. Lots of light, but also lots of green. Now what I also did lately, from the minimalism, I came to realism. So I bought a few paintings from Aram Gershuni. We have the chicken, we have the steak, we have the flour, and we have the peppers, which are all super realistic. So Aram asked me one day if I can do a portrait of mine. So I then agreed, and he calls the portrait the banker, because that's my profession, kind of. I run a multi-family office, but I come originally from banking. So he painted myself, and it's a beautiful portrait, just I don't know how to hang myself on the wall, so it's actually not hanging. And then I reconnected to Yaakov Busidan, the gentleman George Bloch was helping back in the 70, by the way, Yaakov was living in London for many years. So I will tell you about Georges Bloch in a minute. So Yaakov Boussidan, I reconnected to him, and he also wanted to make a portrait of me, so I let him also make a portrait. So I actually have two portraits of myself, which are completely different. But again, I'm not hanging them because, yes. Georges Bloch was the cousin of my grandfather, and he was a very, very close friend to Pablo Picasso, and he was the one who catalogued all the Picasso lithographies. And he always got the first page, so the one of the 50 or 75 prints. So I have here one of those first prints, which were dedicated to George's wife, and she gave it to my grandmother, which by coincidence had the same name. So George's wife was Jenny Bloch, and my grandmother was also Jenny Bloch, actually spelled differently, but nevertheless Jenny Bloch. George's Jenny gave as a gift to my grandmother that lithography, which is now in my possession, and we all, both Shennys were laughing and saying, one day the grandchildren or the great-grandchildren of my grandmother will not know that it's the other Jenny Bloch who got the painting and think that my great-grandmother got it from Picasso. So I made sure that that will not happen, and it's on the back, on the frame of the painting, there's a short story explaining that this lithography was given to George's wife and not to my grandmother. Georges Bloch was a big patron of Israeli art and of the Israeli art museums. Both museums, Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, were bequested with a third of his lithography collection. When he died, he didn't leave any children. So it's very funny to see that actually in my art collection, which I buy with passion and not with any program behind, not a strategy. So I think this really represents how Israel is functioning. Israel is a very dynamic country. We carpe diem, we live the day, we enjoy, and we flip from happy to sad and from sad to happy. And the same is with the art. An artist might have one way of projecting his things, but Israeli art is eclectic as much as the lifestyle is dynamic here and eclectic in all the colors. And you might see a painting in one eye, but you might see it from another eye. So there's to every side there's many facets to every painting. And you will see also in my Bokopsa paintings that on the first sight you think, ooh, colorful design, very decorative. And then you start looking at them more deeply, and then you see, whoa, there are guns and tanks and rockets, and actually it's about wars. So it's the romantic side of the war perhaps, or it is the everyday life here. We live with all those things, and we put it in the art, and we put it in the design, and we put it in our lifestyle, which is much more intensive than I'm used to back from Switzerland, which has its good and its bad sides, of course. It's like everything, but it's very dynamic, and we like this vibe. So that's about the connection, my family, my collection, my art is to Israel, and I hope you like what you see, and it's interesting for you.
Thank you, Phillipe. What an interesting collection and story. We look forward to visiting it in person on our next BFAMI trip to Israel.
Raffle tickets are on sale until Friday, 10 a.m. GMT, with huge thanks to the Maurice Hotel Paris for the amazing chance to win a 2-night stay, including lunch, at Alain Ducasse' 2 Michelin star restaurant. The price also includes art and cultural highlights.
There are so many fabulous ways to support us. By buying a piece in our amazing emerging artist sale, by buying an extra raffle ticket, or placing a bid on the incredible Thomas Struth auction lot, or by simply making a donation to BFAMI. Thank you.
All information can be found on this website. Please do support our programs across the art museums in Israel.
And now for our final trip back across the sea to beautiful Israel, where we will hear from our museum directors.
The last few months have been so hard, but as we look to the future,
we can see a time when our museum lights will once again be turned on, shining brighter than ever before. We hope and pray for a time when we will all meet again in our galleries and gather inspiration and solace from our wonderful works of art and rich exhibitions.
My wish is to open the museum again. My wish is to hear children laughing, to see people looking at art, to feel the presence of human consciousness in our galleries again. I wish 2021 will be a year of healing for ourselves, for our families and for our communities.
2020 brought silence to our galleries and creative spaces. We can't wait to hear the hum of adults and children chatting and taking part once again in the guided tours, workshops and lectures that we used to give. If there is something that we learned from this pandemic about the cultural field, is understanding how fragile it is and how crucial it is to our mental and spiritual existence.
We locked the doors of 6 unique museums here in Haifa in the month of March, having no idea that this will turn to be a full lost year. We cannot wait. We are desperate to be able to open.
The continuous lockdown imposed on museums across Israel, the Rubin Museum included, under the circumstances of a pandemic, is totally unexpected and very unacceptable. Needless to say that the closed doors, the absence of viewers, and the silence are difficult to get used to. Hopefully, we will soon reopen and hear once again the noise of the Israeli kids running through the galleries during our educational programs supported by BFAMI.
My team have been amazing. They have not stopped creating and thinking outside the box. But it's the small things I miss the most. The quick chat while making a morning coffee and the ability to walk into someone's office to pick their brain about something. I can't wait to greet my team in person, to see them back in the museum, getting ready to welcome visitors in our new exhibition, Black Box. An exhibition we worked hard on it in the last few months, dealing with the relationship between objects and human beings. Well, the objects are here and ready. We are just missing the people.
Up here in the north, we have a slightly slower pace, but that doesn't stop us from doing the best we can. In 2020, we welcomed over 30,000 visitors. It began with a groundbreaking exhibition, Naked Soul, Chaim Southin and Israeli Art, and continued after the first lockdown with 4 new exhibitions. We can't wait to start up again. We're doing the best we can.
We all have been watching the news. I don't remember a time when so many people tuned in to watch the news. One of the most upsetting global stories is the rise in domestic violence and abuse. Our project aims to stand by the community of Bat Yam, especially local women forces that protest and act against domestic violence. In an attempt to offer possible healing to the community, Moby initiated an artistic process in commemoration of the victims. We are working on a participatory event that creates a soft monument, built and based not on stone and cement, but rather on new perception of commemoration, that harnessing values of growth, merge, and transformation.
What upsets me the most is the level of need I'm seeing all around me. The children and their families that used to come to our pop-up museum were forced to stay at home, and they were isolated from their culture and communities.
The past year has been challenging. Due to the museum's shutdown, we decided to reach out to members of our local community and invite them for cultural events in the neighborhoods and by Zoom. It is so moving and joyful to feel their engagement and need for activities that pull them out of the lockdown.
2020 was difficult and unexpected, both for the gallery space and for the art and education wing, which we had to postpone few of our projects. We're looking forward for 2021 to continue the encounter that we did with different schools and communities, both within the educational wing and in the gallery space, and to work with art in different ways.
At night I dream that I am in the museum, going through the galleries
meeting visitors and talking with them, and they ask me about the objects and why do I insist on calling them works of art, and I explain. And so I really wish we could go back to what we used to do, stop all the virtual activity and go back to normal life.
We at the Tel Aviv Museum of Art are part of the local and international cultural community with a strong commitment to arts education. During this coming year, we look forward to welcoming visitors and hope they enjoy our diverse exhibition program, as well as educational activities, which include Women and Girls at Risk project, educational projects inspired by current exhibition, annual exhibition for the Weil family. With BFAMI support, they will come true. Wishing to all of us good health and the fast recovery of the world of arts and culture.
Thank you to all our museum directors. BFAMI's pledge to you. We are here for you. We will support you and we are with you every step of the way.
Funds raised during this event and throughout the year support programs to benefit all echelons of society across 14 museums in Israel. Even in these difficult times, art bonds us together. Our love for Israel bonds us together. And these bonds transcend politics and give us perspective, joy, and happiness. This last year has been hard for us all, but together we will ensure that art continues to act as the greatest catalyst for social equality. Please click on the donate page of this website and support our work and be part of our journey. Before we go, a huge thank you to 45 Park Lane, Thomas Struth and Mark Hetzler Gallery, and Le Maurice. Thank you all for your incredible support.
To all of you, our BFAMI family, thank you. Stay safe, test negative and be positive, and together we pray for a happy and healthy 2021.